panel discussion for the day coming your way, which is going to be focused on supply chain risk in the age of ransomware, cloud and on-prem, strategies for resilience and protection and building of cyber resilience supply chain. And to take this panel discussion forward, I take great pride in welcoming our moderator for the panel discussion, Mr. Agnidipta Sarkar, CISO Advisory, Colortokens Inc. A big round of applause for him as he takes over the stage. Can we have a round of applause? Come on, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, it's time to welcome our panelists. Can we put our hands together and welcome Mr. Himanshu Kumar Das, CISO Cred. A big round of applause for him. We also have with us Ms. Kavitha Kadambi, CISO Infosys Limited, Dr. Suresh A Shan, Technology Leader, Mahindra Finance, and Dr. Yusuf Hashmi, Group CISO, Jubilant Bhartia Group. A big round of applause for our 4 panel members and, of course, our moderator.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I know this session is just probably before you have lunch, which means we are going to see a lot of exits very soon from the hall. So I will try and keep yourself engaged. The good news is that we have 30 minutes, and the bad news is if we have 30 minutes, because I don't think that's enough time to discuss what we are about to discuss. So I have a great panel here. I would suggest that, if you can keep yourself with a brief 30 seconds introductions, starting with Kavitha, as to what you do. People should know who you are, and just a small thing about what your experience is, so that we can then go ahead, so that I can start asking the wrong questions.
Thank you. It's difficult to be in the spot if you have to give a brief introduction for just 30 seconds. But as we see, I'm currently the CISO with Infosys. I started out in the industry about 29 years ago. It's exciting to be in the cybersecurity space at this point in time. And I'm excited to be part of this panel when we're talking about supply chain, given that we're right in the middle of it, being a large IT services organization which has a global footprint.
Thank you. Himanshu, please.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much, Agnidipta. Thank you. Privileged to be part of your panel always. Hello, everyone. My name is Himanshu. I'm amongst the founding team member and Chief Information Security Officer at Cred. I have over 12 years of experience in cybersecurity risk and compliance domain.
Sorry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Suresh A Shan. I do represent Computer Society of India Chairman from Mumbai chapter. I do have research 3 patents on cybersecurity, where how we can simplify IT utilizing part of rural India.
Hi, very good afternoon, everybody. Myself, Yusuf. I head the cybersecurity for Jubilant Bhartia Group, majorly into manufacturing and pharma, multiple businesses around. So 26 years of experience and focus majorly in transformation of cybersecurity.
Thank you. So I don't know if all of you have grasped the weight of the panel. So we have somebody who is from the largest IT company probably, who's got a huge amount of experience in securing all the different stakeholders that an IT services company has. We have somebody who's got considerable experience in securing cloud. We have somebody who's got academia and security as a background. And then we have finally Yusuf, who's an expert on industrial systems and industrial control systems and how cybersecurity works there. So without much ado, let me get on to the topic. I know many of us have discussed cybersecurity in supply chain to detail, but what I really want to focus on is, should supply chain not have the kind of protection that it really has? What could be the impact? What could be the business impact that enterprises will have? And to begin, let me start with you, Himanshu. Can you tell us about, if you had because you are in the cloud space, what kind of impact do you see if the supply chain is not secure?
Thank you so much. So to begin off with, so far my experience has been that, all the cloud service providers that we work with are always at a battle, and I'm fighting a war. So the moment I wake up every day, there is a moment of surprise for me. And what I've learned over the period of time is, you need to start thinking backwards and start thinking fundamental, because you are always facing a crisis, and what really happens is there is something going on at any given point in time, whether you are cloud or off cloud. So when you talk about supply chain, I think over a period of time, the learning has been that, how do you start building proactive guardrails? Not only thinking on cloud, but thinking about your partners that you work with. Because currently today we are working with a lot of partners, a lot of payment gateway, a lot of banks. So for us, it is important as a business to provide a better customer experience. Now, keeping business in mind, I think when you think about supply chain over a period of time, my learning particularly has been on thinking fundamentals, right? And one of the things that I have learned is to sort of start building baseline around supply chains, right? And when I talk about baseline, there are very, very fundamental things, right? I mean, when you think about cloud service provider, obviously cloud service provider is not going to provide me the baseline. They are going to basically build a boundary wherein they will say that, hey, XYZ is my responsibility, but ABC is something which you need to take care of. Now this ABC becomes very broad over the period of time, because you're not just working with one partner, you are working with multiple partners, and every day there is addition of new partner, right? So what I want to bring a point is, resiliency sort of becomes very, very crucial, and you have to start thinking resiliency at some point in time. Now again, if you go one level deeper inside thinking resiliency and all, things are undefined mostly, right? And most of the time you'll work with partner who may or may not have security posture defined. And then what is your baseline is something which keeps on bothering you all the time, right? And I think defining that baseline becomes very important, and that's what my learning has been in terms of supply chain. Now, once we have built a baseline for you, and what I have done at my company is over the period of time, we have started to build baselines, right? And in context of our company, I think one of the critical baseline becomes data has to be localized, right? And data localization sort of becomes our baseline that any third party that work with needs to have data in India, right? So you start to build such baseline wherein anything that is very much crucial to a business sort of ties down to your supply chain as well. And this is how you start to build and think about resiliency, right? So I think this has been my learning so far, thinking fundamental and sort of, thinking backwards in terms of building resiliency and all. So I think that's my view.
Thank you so much. What about Yusuf? What has been your experience in not securing the supply chain? What could be impact if you can give us some practical experiences? I mean, I was reading on, on the web on the top 5 cyber attacks that have happened, and I see one thing is consistent, that everybody says that they had to shut down their operations.
It's a very pertinent question, and it's a very serious matter, right? Which we usually take it as one of the agenda usually in your is the supply chain risk. Because if you see practically, the supply chain or your partners or vendors, they have more access than you, right? They have visibility, they have access, they have control over your system more than what you can actually have. So I think that's and of course, we are more and more going in the outsourcing for years now. So which means that more and more control is going the other way, right? So for me, it's very essential to know my supply chain, right? My first, my second party, my third party, my fourth parties, right? So the entire supply chain comes from that, and most of the problem happens at the fourth and the third layer of your supply chain. So, and when it comes to cloud, right, you have your CSP, you have your SaaS providers, right? You have your PaaS providers, right? So I think it's a big complex environment that we are currently living in, and very essential to understand these entire supply chain that is delivering your business goals, right? And you are heavily relying on the trust that you have on your suppliers, which once it gets breached, I think you can see the humongous impact, colonial pipelines. Many breaches happen because of your lack of visibility of what your supply chain is doing around. So access is the most important aspect, that what kind of access, what kind of data that they are accessing. So essentially, at the right point of contractual obligation, you should have clear visibility and controls define what your supply chain is in and what kind of access that they carry, right? And then you have to have those controls and visibility, what your supply chain is doing, what your partners are actually having access. So if you are able to actually make that, I think continuous assessment of your supply chain, right? Right from the point you actually onboard the supplier during the operational stage, and of course, at the end of the contract, you have to ensure that my data is secure, they don't carry away, right? So understanding, and each of the aspect plays a major role on the potential capability of your supplier. My operational capability, because they have access to my system, they will have, which means that what kind of control that they have laid down in their environment to protect my data, right? Because accountability always lies with me.
Accountability is
right. I can't shed away my responsibility, accountability. If I give it, that's what is happening, because in outsourcing, most of your internal teams actually rely on your third parties. If I ask something from my operations team, they pass it over to their support partners or MSSP or their service provider. It's because you're losing the track of what your environment is all. You're relying on third parties. So, which means that the risk level is growing at a fast pace when you are actually losing the control on your system. I think that you need to get hold of it. That will happen only once you have the skills, you have the understanding of the environment and the data, of course, that ultimately that you are trying to protect.
So let me turn to Kavitha. I'm going to ask you two questions, not one. Number one, because you come from an organization which is sitting right in between the supply chain. You have organizations to which you supply to, and you take services from other organizations as well. So my first question is, when you look at cybersecurity issues and challenges in terms of what the customers are asking, because I remember once I was outsourcing in my previous role, and the vendor said that we have a binding corporate rules document, and that's all that we're going to give you, while I am accountable in Europe for GDPR, and that's a difficult commitment to keep up. So my first question is, what is the world that you are looking at, and how do you deal with these daily challenges? My second question is, Infosys being Infosys, you have a size which is uncomparable to many others. Of course, there are a few countable organizations which are of your size, which means that the challenge of the challenge of the supply chain being secure or not lands more on the CISO's table when it comes from customers. So just these two questions.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to limit you to 4 minutes if you can.
Two
Because
questions and just
that
4
number is
minutes
going
on
on.
something as complex. Then let me try to answer both your questions in the most succinct possible format. Yes, you're right. We're bang in the middle of the supply chain. We supply to global Fortune 100s, 500s, and beyond. And in a lot of cases, we are their largest IT services provider, not limited to just IT, but also cybersecurity. We, in some sense, go ahead and provide that cybersecurity on the one hand. And on the other hand, we have to secure our own organization, which is about 300,000 plus employees, a global workforce across pretty much all inhabited continents and countries, and now we're in a hybrid world of different kinds of skills, nationalities, languages, true geo-diversity. And we have to work with a lot of partners in our own ecosystem, which means that we have to secure our customers, our employees, our partners, and vendors, and all possible stakeholders. So it's a true, complex set of organizations that we really have to secure. And in that sense, how we address supplier risk vis-a-vis supply chain risk has to be distinguished. Suppliers in the true form for me and for us would be all partners who are providing any kind of services to us. And in that sense, it could be products that we use for our own securing our landscape. It could also be any kind of products that we use which is not necessarily IT oriented. We also have a lot of campuses worldwide which are really pioneering in terms of the kind of infrastructure that they provide. So it is a very, very different set of parameters that we go ahead and use to secure our suppliers. And over there, transitive dependencies and relationships do matter. For our customers and all other stakeholders, it's again very different in terms of how we go ahead and provide services to them and in what way we work with them, their regulations, their needs, and what their compulsions are. So in that sense, if I have to talk about the customer landscape and the customer ecosystem, we have to work very closely with them to understand what their needs are and go ahead and give them the services that they are, of course, demanding in that sense, but also go ahead and address the challenges that come given that some of those services can never be provided in black and white, and we have to go ahead and protect ourselves. So onto your previous question that you said, if we have to go ahead and address network access, if there is a threat that we determine on our customers, it is something that we have to mutually agree upon and go ahead and take the right decisions in a timely manner to protect our own ecosystem. On the flip side, we have to also ensure that, like we heard from the previous speakers, we're protecting identities of our suppliers, our customers, our employees, and everybody. And in case identities are, we believe, might be compromised for whatever reason, go ahead and have them address those credentials and see how best to do it in our vantage point in terms of suggestions which we might give, recommendations which might give, or mandates that we may have to go ahead and take. It is a complex ecosystem, and these are just some examples that I can give in the 4 minutes that I took.
No, thank you for being succinct. And I think what you're saying makes complete sense because it gives us an understanding of the fact that it's not easy to balance both worlds, the supply risk and the supply chain risk. And that brings me to Dr. Shanmugam. So you've been in academia, you've been doing a lot of work in that area. What do you think that the enterprises can look forward from policy-making bodies and standards-making bodies in reducing or in managing, I wouldn't say reducing, I would say in managing supply chain risks so that enterprises or leadership are able to take business decisions much faster and much more easier?
So it's a great question. I'll put it with a case study so that how it addresses. A rural finance company want to address 1,600 locations where even it's not spoken, English is not spoken, and challenge is what? Connectivity is not there, electricity is not there, almost like resource availability is not there. So wherever connectivity is not there, the technology has to have both online and offline solutions, either on mobility or the IoT, whichever is possible. Again, even branches do have less than 64 kbps, so you can't even download a technology toolkit. So that's a given challenge from connectivity. Resource availability, the people could not even appreciate or understand what is the security concern there, or how to use it or misuse it. Awareness is something not even heard of, so that's a condition given. So what with the regulators framework, we discussed with, again, RBI in terms of Rural Innovation Hub, and they come out with something idea called every 5 location one IT personnel could be from the local. He will be joining through the third parties, again with the patterns and framework, whatever is set between. And he will be changed every 3 years with the kind of work what he's trying to do. And he will be a CIO, CTO, CISO of that 5 locations, and he speaks local language. He simplifies IT. It doesn't deploy IT, he has to simplify IT, he has to ensure that how it goes to local. Especially, we call it RAM, Rajasthan, UP, MP, where we try to bring out how the local elements, whatever can be made to simplify IT so that we can create a model, earn to pay model. That means a particular farmer or a transporter will made to earn so that he can pay back to us. So such a business model, which is reliable more on the framework, where the secured, whichever is trying to use both of online, offline, use as much as on an electronic pass machine, which is subjective to the memory kept part of it, and trying to create that as per the RBI regulators, how much data of a customer can be done, and it can be defined to that individual level, whether it can be a branch account manager or a typical back office person, or from HR, or from different dignitaries, whatever they're trying to do. The kind of framework which is set within the regulators, how much data they can use it, what data they can do it, and it is added every 6 months, like how things can be seamlessly taken it part of the system, and multi-folded, like where every village will have more than 15 to 20 multiple people from different organizations working part of it. Somebody could be a startup, just now they started, they can be added, they can be form into the regulations, and it started even empowering the KOC norms, like what best we can do part of it. So it has started with the basics, whatever which we can see part of it. Today we can say 1,00,000 customers are used part of it, and they are able to get that earn to pay model, where it has empowered during COVID. They had something called a community cloud, where that particular customer data was shared and the customer can use the benefit of the data, which has empowered them part of it. Here the process, policy, procedures defined based on the local academia. We use the help of the local universities.
So how did supply chain risk affect this whole enterprise?
The basic which was told by the regulators was supply chain has to be moderated from centrally stored distributed data capture. All the rules, whatever part of the NBFC, BFSI, has to be fixed part of it, defined, and it has to be translated to the locals, and local has to be trained on such thing on a continuous fashion, and has to ensure timely delivery. And again, simplifying IT is not just a deploying technology, it's again getting into an accounting software and even capturing the customer information, how much we can create that awareness, simplifying where people do have oral discussions, people can even talk, that information is captured part of the local language, send again either through the medias, whatever it is available there, ensure like it is a central system.
Let me ask Yusuf, so one of the things that we see that a supply chain, it's called a supply chain, is if there is a disruption in the supply chain. When I say disruption, it could be due to a cyber attack. Do you think that, if in the industrial control systems world, there is a very famous PERA model, right? Purdue model, which is focused on making sure that you segregate manufacturing operations from IT industry. But now with digitalization, Industry 4.0, everything is getting connected. Industry 5.0 is on the anvil. What do you think are some foundational capabilities that the organization should focus on so that we are ready to meet that target?
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of noise.
I think
There was a drone in between. Can someone fix that noise? It's okay. Yusuf, back to you.
So, yeah, from the manufacturing side, because manufacturing, if you see, plays a major role towards the economy of the country, right? So, and smart factories concept is not old now. In India, slowly and gradually, we are trying to achieve Industry 4.0. And the next future, what we see is 5.0, which is more connected devices, more control over your OT environment, your ICS environment, right? So I think the Purdue level, which is of course level 0 to level 5, is a great way to protect. I would say that not only OT, I think if that framework can be applied in the IT side also, right? Because IT, we have generally the OSI layers that we actually layer 1 to 7. So I think if you can harmonize the OT,
the
Purdue
zoning
level, I
the
think that will
concept,
create a great opportunity to see that how we can actually leverage the OT side into IT side as well. But nevertheless, the OT Purdue level, level 0 to level 5, which is your enterprise, and then there's one critical layer in between the OT, which is 3.5 and 3, which is generally you have IT will have stop there if I am able to actually give the technology enablement to my OT. So I'll stop there, right? The next 2 and 0 and 1, 2 is usually on the engineering side. That's what the instrumentation team have more control. That's the visibility, I think, is very important, that usually we don't have it at that level. We stop at level 3.5. We can't go below level. That's we have to, and because the knowledge, that level doesn't get actually incubated into you, because for that perspective, the collaboration with the engineering, the instrumentation and the operations is a must for an IT to create that harmonized environment into your OT. Because if anything goes wrong, and that's the reason why there's a segregation at that level. Of course, I have segregated my IT and OT environment. I have a DMZ in between industrial. I have a firewall and IT and the firewall and OT side, right? So, but that's not just end of segregation. Segregation means that you need to further get inside each of the layers. How would you create a containment strategy that if something goes wrong at the motor side, which is actually sensors, do not impact my control systems. So one is the sensing, and then the sensors feed into the IO system to your control system. So if something goes wrong, I don't want to impact my entire level 0, right? So it's very essential to create that micro segmentation at each level, that then only you would be able to contain. If anything goes wrong, if there's a lateral movement, you can just kill that movement in that particular zone itself. So conduiting zoning is going to be the next game changer in the OT industry. And of course, 62443 would give you a better management view of that, what need to be done at each layer. I think that you have to translate into technological process controls lay down into your OT environment. I think it's very essential to actually get that.
I think that's brilliant. I mean, you've literally told us that what you're talking about is a foundational capability.
Yes.
That if you know that you are able to distinguish between areas where a cyber attack can form,
exactly,
and areas that you want to continue your business with, then that is something preparing for 5.0, but industry 5.0. But let me, swivel that and go to the cloud, because in coming to Himanshu, you've got this experience. One of the big challenges on the cloud is, in spite of all the technologies that are available, foundationally, there is a possibility of container escape. There is a possibility of somebody who's hacking into Kubernetes, and it is probably due to some issue with configuration errors, which are not going away, right?
Absolutely.
As CISOs, you all deal with that every day. Asset management is a challenge. Do you think that when it comes to securing a supply chain, it is very useful to keep a very clear, he says that he used the word visibility, on which suppliers are affecting which part of my cloud business?
No, fair. I think this is a very valid point. So when you look at cloud, there is one very interesting thing and concept altogether. There is something called as reference architecture. Right now, if you look today, most of the time reference architecture on cloud is taken as a best practice, which is not the right thing to do, right? And if you look at reference architecture of a cloud, then technically it's a solution to your design problem of your network, right? And this is a fundamental thing which most of the time people miss out, right? And the moment you start thinking that you need to take a reference architecture seriously and then start implementing the reference architecture, there are two very important problems which is being solved. One is, the moment you think about reference architecture, you are basically bringing multiple layers, as Dr. Yusuf also spoke about segmentation. The reference architecture exactly talks about how do you segregate your DMZ from your internal network, right? And in cloud, you have a virtual private network or virtual private cloud where you have multiple layers where you can have subnets, you can have multiple VPCs, and within those VPCs also you can have multiple security groups. So you can create basically a chain of layers wherein it becomes difficult for anyone to exploit data or even get into your system. The second challenge that reference architecture solves is the principle of least privilege, right? Wherein once you build layers, obviously to get access to layer, you will need to give certain access to each of those layers, right? And getting this access sort of becomes one of your guardrail where things actually sort of becomes very, very important that you are restricting people not to have access to all your layers. When I talk about layers, I think it's a simple concept of having a 3-tier architecture where you have a client, you have your server, and you have a database, right? And keeping things very, very simple, you start to build layers in the simple 3-tier architecture, And based on that, you can distinguish between, who needs access to ECS.
So to your point, reference architecture on the cloud
Right.
could be something that could be used as a foundational model
Right.
to make sure that your threats are managed
Right.
in your entire supply chain, because you'll be able to have visibility as to what really the supply chain is working on.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me come to Kavitha. The challenge, I believe, then is because you're operating in data centers, in brick and mortar locations, you're also operating on the cloud, and therefore your challenge is probably, I mean, one thing that he and I talked about a little earlier is, can we take an industry 4.0 or a para model industrial DMZ to the cloud? And I'm sure in some way or the other, it does affect your organization as well. So the question that I have for you is, what is it that you believe are foundational capabilities that you must have across your brick and mortar infrastructure and the cloud, which could help address a supply chain, cyber attack, a visibility on that?
Again, that's a large question, and most basic principles, standards, and certifications really go back to foundational principles. To say, hey, make sure that you're architected well. Make sure that you have your basics in place in terms of identity, access, devices, assets, data.
And change.
And change. So nothing has changed in that, in some sense, despite newer technologies like AI, which have come in and in some sense disrupted at least a lot of thinking as well as capabilities that are out there. So the fundamentals really rule. Having said that, there will always be issues at the edge. And the issues at the edge, when I say that, would be issues around edge in terms of the cloud or non-cloud, edge with respect to what OT and edge definitions around that are, edge with respect to what customer-vendor relationships are like, and the likes. Now that we talk about zero trust and the likes, it has to be implemented in a manner where we are able to see progress in terms of how we are taking forward the fundamentals. I think we're out of time.
Yeah, I think we're out of time. So let me just summarize what I heard from all of you.
Just one which is very important today.
Yeah, let me summarize, but I think we are out of time. So let me summarize what I just heard from all of you. Number one, you said that there is a substantial challenge of cyber risks that affect the supply chain and its resilience. Are you showing that to me to cut down me on time? Yeah, because it's making a sound. Okay, so what I was saying is that number one thing that you talked about is there is definitely attention that the leadership should be giving to how the supply chain needs to be more resilient by reducing the amount of risk that you face. The second thing which I heard you say is that there needs to be foundational capabilities around how this whole thing is going to work. And I want to conclude by saying there is one capability which every organization must focus on, and that is modeling. We've forgotten how to do modeling. I'm an old man, right? As we were discussing, and I believe that if we don't plan and prepare for how we could be facing challenges in cybersecurity through modeling probably defenses, we are not there yet. So with that, I would thank everybody and hand it over to the moderator back.
Thank you so much. Can we have a big round of applause for them? We only gave them 30 minutes and they managed to do a fabulous job. I want to quickly request Mr. Balaramanan from Microland to kindly come forward and felicitate our panel members and of course our moderator. So can we have a quick photo with all of you all on stage, please? A quick picture, and we also have Mr. Navneethan joining us.